Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Mental Health and Wellness during COVID-19. I'm so delighted to be here tonight talking about mental health with you. Actually, I'm hosting. I'm Rebeca, and I'll be your host tonight. I'll be your host for the next hour or so. And I'm joined by incredible people. I have here Jessica O'Brien. She's a psychotherapist and a counselor. And here I have Shannon Gelb. She's a psychologist, and we have amazing women that are going to help her navigate through these uncharted waters. I'm so excited and I truly hope that this moment that we spend together answering maybe questions and concerns that were brought to us prior to this meeting, or maybe answering a question that you bring to our Facebook page. And we're going to talk about how to navigate COVID-19. It's new. Like I said, uncharted waters. We haven't experienced anything like that. But I truly hope that by tonight, you're going to be able to understand a little bit better what's going on, see that you're not alone through this, and maybe you're going to be able to have a few tools to help you, equip you to endure this time. And we hope that this time will pass. But with this, we're hoping that you're going to be able to understand a little bit more about yourself, about your feelings, about questions, how to deal with isolation. Maybe my appetite is much higher this time, or maybe I am concerned for a loved one. So we're going to have kind of two blocks. First one, we're going to talk about things that you can do to improve your own well-being. And the second block, we're going to talk about how you can support others through this time. And I want to welcome Jessica O'Brien. Jessica, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you so much, Shannon. I'm really, really excited. I thought about you both because I met you both prior to tonight. Jessica was my professor at U of S. She taught me neuropsychology. And I know Shannon on a personal level, but I have learned from her in her own personal way to deal with things, and I've been able to live certain moments with her and her family. So I thought there too would be able to help us so much tonight. And I know you're going to be blessed and helped tonight. So first thing, I'm going to start with, I think, one of the main questions, and you can jump in, whichever you want to start maybe. How do we deal with isolation? Maybe I'll guide. Maybe I'll go to Jessica first. Jessica, how do you think we should deal with isolation during this pandemic?
So I think firstly, it's really important to acknowledge that these are not normal times, and humans are generally not comfortable being isolated. We're very social creatures. So this is affecting everyone in different ways. So one way I kind of like to think about it is through the Maslow hierarchy of needs. So I'm not sure if people are familiar with that. But if you want to picture a triangle, much like the food pyramid, and at the bottom of the triangle are things like physiological safety, security, things like that. And then at the top of the triangle are things like more self-actualization, so self-esteem, motivation, productivity, those higher level functions. And the basic idea behind this triangle is that it's very, very hard to focus on our higher level functioning when things like basic security and safety are compromised. And so I think that really fits well with what we're all dealing with right now. This is a difficult time. We don't have a lot of security. We don't have certainty about the future. We don't really know how long this is going to go, what's it going to be like. Mm-hmm. And I think that really weighs on people, and it really can impact our ability to be productive and function normally. So first, I think we have to acknowledge that. And I also think that while we need to acknowledge it, you can't really stay stuck there. I think there's part two, which is, yes, this is a much more difficult time than normal, but also how are we going to support ourselves to cope with that? And one really simple thing I think that everyone can do is to implement some sort of routine. So spontaneity is all fine and good, but I think that most humans do thrive really well when they have some sort of structure to their day. So I don't think that anyone is feeling really, really great when they're staying in pajamas all day. And that's not to beat yourself up if you're someone who's been doing that. But it doesn't generally lead to a sense of stability. It's just one example. So I think, the more you can implement some sort of routine where, you have maybe set meal times, or you start your day with a walk, or anything that's realistic. I know if you have children, it might be more a little bit more chaotic, but children also thrive off routine. So any way you can get some sort of stability and schedule to your day, I think will help most people cope with isolation.
Routine that can bring you, it's one of the things that you can't control, right? There's so much there's so many things you cannot control during this pandemic, but if you go to a routine, you have some sort of stability, and I feel like that could give you a great sense of self through this process. How about you, Shannon? Do you have anything to add to this idea of how to cope with isolation?
Yeah, I agree with what Jessica said there. That hierarchy of needs is so important. And I think a challenge in this situation is that we're not all in the same place on that hierarchy right now. Some of us are really struggling to meet our basic needs, and some of us, are just adjusting to a different type of life at home that's stressful in new ways that we're not used to. So I think for people who are struggling with those basic resources is to not be afraid to ask for help. And we have to figure out how to ask for help in different ways than maybe we're used to. So accessing what the resources are out there and finding out where we can get those things that we need.
Yeah, I can see that, because sometimes the basic needs are not being met, and sometimes we have some sort of pride or maybe some sort of concern. This is not the time. This is the time to ask for help, right? It's a unique time we're living. And I think that we can move to, we're talking about routines, right? We're talking about how to cope staying at home and all of this. And one of the concerns was how to deal with guilt. As I'm staying at home, if I have children, I am homeschooling. If I'm caring for an older adult, right? How do we cope with the sense of guilt that might be lingering some of us through this process? Because that was one of the concerns that was brought to me when I talked to people about, we're going to have a conversation about mental health. And that was something I could tell was a burden that some people are facing. Can we add anything to that sense of guilt that people might be going through? And I'll start with you, Shannon, if that's okay.
Sure. And again, this is an area where people's sense of guilt could be coming from so many different areas right now. It could be because you're working from home and you're just not as productive as usual. And it's trying to figure out how you can give a good quality product, I guess, to your work ethic, but not at the expense of your family. You might be homeschooling your kids from home at the same time. So I think the routine will be beneficial in that, and setting realistic expectations for your family. This is when I need to work. This is what I need to get my work done. And then, but having a balance, so you're having enough time for your family as well, and lowering your expectations. During this time, perfectionism shouldn't be the goal, and it might be your enemy if you are thinking that's what you need to achieve. Things are going to be different now, and I think that most employers will have some understanding for that.
Yes. And I feel like I was reading an article on CTV recently, and it was related to how people are trying to be very productive during this time, right? There was a posting about if you haven't written a book, or if you haven't learned a new skill during this pandemic, you haven't accomplished anything, you don't have the stability to do, the discipline to develop something important. And I think that might fit into people's sense of guilt and how I'm not being as productive. And this article was talking about how people may cope differently through stress, right? Some people may be extra productive because their personality is like, I'm gonna make sourdough bread. I'm gonna learn a new skill. Now I'm gonna learn how to sew a skirt for myself. Whereas other people coping mechanisms may be, I'm gonna lie down a little bit earlier. I'm gonna watch something to make me feel more comfortable, and they are not as active. And what I'm trying to convey here, it's everybody will experience it differently, and guilt looks differently for people. So I think what you said, Shannon, it's quite timely. that's not the time to be a perfectionist, right? That's not the time to try to do everything at once. You're at home, if you're with children. I don't know how many of us here that are watching have children at home right now, but interruptions are part of your day now. You try to start something and then you get interrupted. How you cope with that? And I want to bring it to Jessica. Do you have anything that you thought about guilt that we haven't talked about here? Or we can move to the next topic if you think you're saturated on.
I really love what both of you said. I like the idea of this kind of spectrum of guilt, that at one end we have, people who are maybe struggling with things like procrastination or, kind of battling that area and they're feeling guilty about it. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there's people who are struggling with perfectionism and overwhelm as to what they, don't think they can achieve, and the guilt around that. So I think it's good to identify where you are on that spectrum and try to, really figure out what is triggering you personally, because it's going to be different for everyone. And within that, I really like the idea of being able to identify our negative automatic thoughts. So this is a concept that we often talk about in cognitive behavioral therapy, but it's basically just the idea of becoming more conscious of what thoughts are going through your mind. And I think this is so important when you're dealing with something like guilt. So, you might have a thought, for example, like, I'm so lazy. And usually a negative automatic thought just goes through your mind so quickly that you're not really consciously aware of it. But it makes you feel bad about yourself. So you might have this thought go through your mind, then you're feeling bad about yourself. So I think the more we can identify those thoughts, you might even be listening to this and be aware of a thought that you have go through your mind unrelated to guilt. I think that can be a really powerful tool in helping us understand where the guilt is coming from and when it's affecting us. And I think once you know what the thought is, you're then able to challenge it a little bit and say, well, is that actually true? Am I always lazy? Have there been times in my life when I was not lazy? And you really can sort of tease that out a little bit and kind of battle that negative thought. So I think that's a really great tool that anyone can use in terms of guilt.
That's incredible, because as you're watching us, you may be thinking exactly something that Jessica mentioned, like, oh, I'm too lazy, or I cannot do this, whatever the thought processes you have on a daily basis. This is the time to challenge them, right? And that, I think that's important, because part of dealing with mental health, part of dealing with the anguish of this moment is looking to yourselves, trying to understand what's going on within us, trying to understand what are my thoughts, what are my emotions. And your idea of challenging negative thoughts, it's so important, because are they true? If they're true, are they true all the time? Do I always feel this way, or at certain times, right? And then you start to feel more compassionate towards yourself. And this is so important at this time, the self-compassion, that component of being kind to yourself. And it's something that I would like to talk to you. I think you brought this thought pattern. What are other ways that we can be kind to ourselves in this moment?
I definitely agree with what Shannon said about lowering those expectations. I think a lot of people fall into a trap of setting these really high goals and having all these things on their to-do list or their mental to-do list, or whatever it is, and it can be really hard to achieve them, especially in times like this. So I think one really nice way to deal with that is to just scale it down, just lower those expectations. Maybe set 2 things that you want to achieve in that day. And this is going to look different for everyone. Some people might have 5 things, some people might have 1. It doesn't matter. But if you're able to tick off that 1 thing or those 5 things in your day, rather than setting 20 things and then feeling bad about yourself for not doing them, the more we can actually achieve our goals, the stronger our confidence muscle kind of becomes. So I think that it's a good thing to do in terms of that issue.
So if you make something achievable, you're going to achieve it. And then if you achieve it, you're going to feel better. And then you're going to achieve more, right? It's one thing leads to the other. So try to be kind with your goals and be realistic about it. It's very, very interesting, because for me, I'm going to go personal here. It's very hard to try to study and then cook meals that are very nutritious and fully homemade, and keep the house tidy and pay attention to my children and try to do it all. So I think prioritizing what you're going to do, what matters the most, and the other things I'm going to do an okay job, but maybe not a perfect job, trying to readjust those expectations. And I'm talking on a matter of a mom, right? And I think everybody can relate to something differently from what you guys are talking about. And I really like the way you're giving specific tools for people that are watching us, and I think they're going to be able to take away a lot of things from tonight. But there's a big one, and this is a big one, and I'm going to say it's a big one because I've been hearing all around, and maybe you can share some ideas with this issue that I would say 90% of people are facing right now. Are we overeating during this pandemic? Are we going more for chips and sugars and breads and all of these things? And if you are, can psychology, can mental health expertise give us anything to help us not to overeat? It's a hard one, I find. Maybe you guys can help me with that. Maybe I can start with Shannon right now.
Sure. Who would have ever thought that a flour and yeast shortage would be the big problem for all of us stuck at home, right?
Right.
But it's not really. It's a small problem. But we do worry about our diets and what that's going to be like. We have more time to bake things maybe we've been wanting to make yummy food, and to maybe overindulge. But at the same time, I think we can look at this, for many of us anyway, as a time when we can slow down and eat meals together as a family, take the time to enjoy our food without feeling rushed. So to celebrate the meal ritual parts of our day. But, I think there's a couple guidelines that we can kind of set up for ourselves in our homes to make eating healthy a little easier, such as trying mostly to only eat at the dinner table. So not eating everywhere, not doing more than one task at the same time. If you're doing something and eating at the same time, you may not be aware of how much you're eating. Mm-hmm. And of course, as much as possible to stock your fridge with healthy foods. It might be a little more difficult when you're not able to shop as often for groceries, but you could buy, more frozen vegetables, more frozen fruits, and try and make those readily available so they're easier to grab. Mm-hmm. As well, I think don't deprive yourself either. Still have those treats. Just try and work on moderation, not having too many of them at once, and try and just be more focused on establishing a healthy lifestyle overall, healthy habits. But
I think that's great because it ties back to the idea of a routine, right? How do I establish my routine? And if you have planned meals, and if you have things that you can do to improve your food intake, right? And I think many of us are emotional eaters, and I think that's why the question is so important. How do you feel about that, Jessica? Do you think that this is the time to care for our health? Is this the time to care for what we're eating, or is the time to be relaxed? Because I saw at the beginning you said maybe we're not going to feel the best by being on our pajamas all day, right? Having a routine and all of that. And sometimes we may use this moment as an excuse to do anything, to eat anything. Do you think that's the way to go, or do you have anything else you'd like to add?
I think it does go back to the idea of, knowing what sort of person you are. So I think eating is a really emotional thing for a lot of people. And in different ways, it can be unique for everyone. Some people overeat, or some people don't eat enough during the day and then they feel that they overeat at night. Mm-hmm. Some people get really stressed and forget to eat or even restrict their eating. So there are lots of ways that people have relationships with food that kind of shift around their levels of stress. Mm-hmm. It's important to sort of understand what kind of person you are. What are your triggers? Are you someone who is really prone to eating a lot at night, or are you someone who gets really stressed and has the tendency to restrict? What sort of person are you, and what can you do to support yourself? So is it not having a certain food in the house, or is it talking with your partner about supporting you to keep an eye on, that you're eating enough, or, something like that. So I think it's really unique for everyone. I think it's a sensitive topic for a lot of people. And I think we just have to be so kind to ourselves and remember these are not normal times and not the time to be trying to achieve perfectionism or anything like that. So
Yes, and I think that it's not a time to be perfectionist. And what I'm learning is that sometimes the simplest foods are the most nutritious, right? Sometimes all you need is some fresh fruit, and you just need the most expensive ones. If you have bananas and apples at home, that's a good snack to go, like carrots, and you can start to implement those little snacks if you're hungry, and instead of going for the bag of chips. And I love what Shannon said about now we can bake more, maybe make some delicious, nutritious foods. And that's an opportunity too, maybe to try something nutritious that you've been wanting to try, a whole wheat bread, some homemade soup with dried lentils. And I have a feeling that we can take this so many ways, but it's sometimes a personal decision. How am I going to see it? Am I going to make the best out of it, or I'm going to make it a difficult time for myself, putting expectations that are hard, trying to go on a crazy diet at this moment, or trying to do more than I can? And I think it ties back to the self-care that we've been talking about. It's so important during this time, how I'm caring for myself and how I'm being to myself kind or not. And there's a question that came to us, and I think it ties really well with what you're saying. How can I lower my expectations and not feel like a failure? Because if I have all these high expectations on myself, if I have all these ideas that I need to be going, and I think what you said kind of answered these questions already, right? Like, have a thought process that's different. Try to challenge negative thoughts. I wonder if there are any other skills that people can learn. And I will go to Jessica, because I know you talk about the negative thoughts, and it's a very hands-on activity. Is there any other skill that you think people can learn at this moment that it's doable, but maybe will help them with this sense of failure, or maybe will help them with this idea that I'm not managing well? Because I know we talk about negative thoughts, but are there any other thoughts that we can fight, or any suggestions that you see maybe when you're counseling people that are not an epidemic, but maybe can be applied to right now, if that makes any sense?
Yes. So one thing that comes to mind when you're saying that for me is sometimes in therapy we talk about the idea of whose voice is in your head, because sometimes we're telling ourselves things like, I should be this, I should be that, why am I not good enough? All these kind of negative thoughts or complex thoughts that can be quite embedded in our consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it'd be a powerful question to ask, whose voice is that? Where does that thought come from? Is it from society? Is it from childhood? Where is this thought process coming from, and does it align with who we are today and how compassionate we might want to be to ourselves?
That's really nice when you're able to try to look at your patterns, your ways of thinking, and try to challenge those, right? Like, is this my voice? Is this someone else's expectation? I think one of the main questions we can ask ourselves is, I'm trying to survive. I'm being a perfectionist. Who am I trying to please? What am I trying to prove here, right? Who do I have to show? Is it a social media that I'm trying to portray perfection? Or do I need now to allocate my time to my family and try to play simple, right? Simple meals, simple lifestyle, to the bare minimum, but the bare minimum that is enough and good and hearty. And I think that sometimes we have, like this time, an unique opportunity to look within ourselves and try to find our motives, try to find what's leading us to anguish. Like, is it caused by the pandemic, or is it caused by my own negative thoughts, my own negative feelings? Because I cannot control whether people are wearing masks or not. I can control whether I am wearing masks or not. I'm just trying to use an example right now. I cannot control if people are being diligent, but I can be diligent the way that I want to be diligent. So what are the things that I can and am able to do to improve my well-being right now? We are on week what? Week 4, week 5 of this pandemic? Week 6?
6 maybe?
Yeah.
So many weeks.
It's been a while. And I think one of the concerns right now, and I didn't put that on the thing, you just thought about that right now, and you might be able to help me, either of you, both of you. People are starting to go back to business, right? We are in Saskatoon. I know Shannon is in BC. I forgot the name of her city, Shannon, sorry. Abbotsford, beautiful Abbotsford. And we are on phase 1 of COVID, right? Coming back. Phase 2 already. Okay, phase 2. I hear it's phase 2. So returning to our businesses little by little. And some people might be more scared. Some people might be more excited. For those who are really scared to return to real life, for those who are experiencing a highest level in anxiety for staying home or for going out, for those who are very concerned for uncertainties, the things that cannot control. I know I touch a little bit on focus on the things we can control, not the things we cannot control. But can you add anything to the discussion that can bring maybe some sort of assurance to these people that it's okay? You know, any kind of words that we can give for the highly anxious individuals who are watching us at this moment. Does that make sense? Am I making any sense here?
Yeah, I think so. I think first off, we're living in a time of uncertainty. And if you are feeling a lot of strong emotions such as fear and anxiety, that's normal. Know that that's normal in this sort of time. And don't berate yourself for feeling that way. Also, now I'm kind of off track. I kind of lost my the question you were asking. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's just we're just talking about the anxious people who are more anxious with whatever.
Right.
That's awesome.
Thank you. One thing I think can be a saturation of media that could be really contributing to the level of anxiety someone's feeling. Some people just keep going back for more, no matter how much anxiety they're experiencing. And you may feel somewhat justified in it because you may feel, I need to know what to do so I can take care of myself, take care of my family, take care of the people at work that I look after. But it's a careful balance, and you need to check in with yourself and seeing if you're taking in too much information, and that's part of what's causing anxiety for you. So that, against the background of what I was saying earlier, it's normal to feel anxious in this situation, but we have to think about our behaviors and what they might be doing to also contribute to the anxiety. Mm-hmm. So for many people, that might mean, I'm not checking social media. Mm-hmm. Or choosing carefully what you're plugging into for social media. Mm-hmm. Generally, things like Facebook and YouTube are not the best places to get your information about COVID from. There could be a lot of things that are more likely to be things that are going to make you anxious.
Yeah, choose your sources, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very interesting, because sometimes there are more alarming things on social media, and the pictures that might be triggering, or things that might not bring you peace, that might make you even more concerned, right? So maybe don't choose those medias of means of getting intel from. And we know there are government websites that are checking the disease. So if you want some numbers, maybe are those places that you want to check. Or maybe you want to stay a little bit without it for a little bit to bring you some peace. That's an option too, right? How about you, Jessica? I'm sure you've worked with a lot of anxious people, right? People with anxiety come a lot for help and support for mental health, either with a diagnosis, formal diagnosis, or not even with a formal diagnosis, but they feel like anxiety is impacting them. What kind of things you would share with them that can be helpful here at this moment?
So many people do struggle with anxiety, and like you say, anywhere from, a regular normal amount that maybe even helps us to get something done to a full-blown anxiety disorder. Obviously, again, that's a huge spectrum. I do think that when working with anxiety, and even just for people who have a little bit of stress in their lives or a normal amount of anxiety, whatever normal is, I do believe that mindfulness and meditation are very powerful tools that anyone can use. They don't cost anything. They take 5 minutes. They're very easy to do. So, we talk about mindfulness, we're talking about, if you're feeling extremely anxious, like notice your surroundings, notice where you are, notice your breathing, notice how your body feels. Try to really ground yourself and take some deep breaths. And I think a lot of people hear, mindfulness and meditation, and I think it's very airy theory. But in terms of the neuroscience behind something like that, when we're taking deep breaths and calming ourselves, we are actually directly sending signals to the survival part of our brain and telling it that we are safe, and it can sort of just calm down a little bit. And that allows the thinking or the logical part of our brain to sort of come back online and be able to function better. So it's not at all an airy-fairy thing to take some deep breaths and ground yourself. Those are powerful tools that we all highly recommend people in general, and especially people with anxiety, to try to.
And the only thing I would say, if you're not a believer of taking deep breaths and calming yourself, just try once. If you're feeling agitated, just sit down in a moment and try to take deep breaths, like simple deep breaths, and you might already experience some calm. What I like about mindfulness is the aspect of focusing on now, right? And I think it helps you develop that exercise of not focusing so much on the past and the things that I cannot control. And it happened, right? And not focusing on the future, on my future fears, but focusing on now, what I can do now. And I love that principle behind mindfulness. It can be quite helpful at this moment. We don't know what COVID-19 will look like in a month. We don't know what it will look like in 2 months. We hope that we're going to get a vaccine and things will get better soon. But what do I have is the now. What do I do with this right now? And that's a principle we can take with us. I cannot control many things, but what I can control, what can I do to make it more helpful to me? And I think Shannon here and Jessica are offering us great insights, and I really appreciate. So we talk a little bit about how to cope ourselves. We talk a little bit about things that were brought to us as questions. Are we good to move to the next section, or do you have anything else you'd like to add about block 1?
No, I'm happy to move forward.
Awesome. So before we move forth, I just want to say hi to our friends who are watching here on Facebook. We have, I see here Eris, I see here Cheryl, Melanie said hi, Eris, Ivelise. Oh, Ivelise, a friend from Brazil. If you want to write down where you're watching from, we would love to know where you're watching from. I know we have people in Saskatoon watching, and I know we have people in São Paulo, Brazil watching. And I'm sure there are other people watching too. So if you want to share, we'd love to know where you're watching us from. And now we're going to move to block 2, potentially block 2 of our discussion. We divide it this way, with the questions and concerns we received. How do I care for myself during this time? And the things we talk about were anxiety and guilt and concern. And the part 2, it's very big this time too, is how can we care for others? And we know that caring for others is really important. And before I start with questions here, I just want to thank deeply our healthcare providers, our frontline workers, people who are fully engaged in this moment. We couldn't be here without you, and we're truly thankful. Our police officers, or I don't want to forget anybody, but we are here because you're able to go to work and keep us safe. Doctors, physicians, nurses, physiotherapists, people who are working right now. Did I forget it? Anybody else can I add here? We just want to say thank you so much. We're thankful for your work. Very hard work. I know you might be under a lot of stress, and I hope that some of the information that we're sharing might be helpful to you, but you are in your thoughts and in our prayers. We thank you so much. And this is the time we're going to talk about how can we care for others. So the first question I have for, it's a very big one. How can I care for others during this pandemic? What is my job in my family? What is my role caring for my children? It's very broad because I want to touch on things like caring for an older adult, caring for children who are homeschooled right now. All children are home right now. We cannot go to the park. How can we cope with that part of caring for someone during this pandemic? Because people who care for others, they have a load of caring for others in terms of, are they safe? Are they fed? Did I meet their needs in the ways that I can meet their needs? But then there's this extra, right? There's more work that you're doing more than ever. So I know it's a very broad question, but can you guys help me with how to address this? Is it possible to address this question?
Yeah, I think we can look at it in a lot of different parts. You mentioned seniors first, and there's a big concern for seniors, and they're in one of the most difficult positions at this time, being extra isolated than most people and really not being able to leave the house. Isolation is a huge mortality risk factor for seniors, even apart from COVID. A big risk factor on par with things like smoking, obesity, heart disease, and dementia. So we need to be looking out for our seniors, especially during this time. I think that those seniors who are connected with technology have a greater opportunity to connect with their family and friends, and they should take full advantage of that.
Mm-hmm.
It really helps, I find, to do something like a Zoom call where you can see your friends and family to not feel so isolated from them. But for us, looking out and seeing the seniors and how can we help them, I think call the seniors in your life that you know. Ask them if you can help them, but even if you can't provide actual tangible help, I think that call is a big help to them, just changing the routine of their day and something that will stick out in their day that they had a call from someone, and just checking in with them on a regular basis and helping them feel not so isolated in that way. But we can also ask for help from our seniors. Actually, this has been something that's been really helpful in our family is my mom will help with my youngest when I'm doing schoolwork with the kids. She'll call her on an app called, I think, Together or something. I can't remember the name of it now. And she reads books to her and plays games with her so that I can get some of the harder schoolwork done with my kids while she's doing that. So it can go both ways. I mean, they can write letters to support organizations like Amnesty International, and that will bring them a greater sense of well-being. So there's a lot of practical suggestions. But for seniors, they also need to I hopefully check in and get help if they need it, if they're feeling too lonely. And I know there's helplines for that. There's a senior resource line in Saskatchewan, and I'm sure there's more than one option for that. And I also, I provided some resources to Rebecca. There's actually kind of a neat workbook that I found put out by BC Northern Health. It's a little bit rough in its appearance, but it has some really nice things for seniors to kind of go through and figure out what they need during COVID. And it has resources, but also about coming up with ideas to fill their day so they're not feeling so isolated and reaching out for help if they need it.
It's incredible how creative your mom can be caring for her grandkids and her children. And I love this idea of her and your daughter spending time together as you're working with your kids. There's like simple things that you can do that are more creative, that you can support each other. Like, she's not at your home, but she's presently there through Zoom or through the app that she uses. And there's ways to go about it. Like, if you have someone you love in a nursing home, right? And I know visitation right now is so limited, and they're being very careful because older adults are at a higher risk because of their age. And I know at least the one that my sister works at, they have at least through like 2 or 3 tablets that you can call a senior who's resident there. So they're trying to facilitate this conversation. So if you have someone in a long-term home, try to understand what's going on. What are the resources they have available for this time? And try to take full advantage of that, communicating with an older adult, because sometimes they are lonely. And if they're not getting visits, it can be a higher risk for their well-being. And there are things we can do. It's just a call. No, it's not just a call. It can be something that will change their day. So simple things we can do that we have a huge impact. And little actions, right, Jessica? We can do little things for others. Do you have any suggestions for older adults that we can do, or do you want to move for maybe the age group of children?
I just wanted to just expand a tiny bit because I love what Shannon said and what you said, Rebecca.
Awesome, thank you.
I definitely agree that a phone call or something like that is actually quite a powerful move. And within that, I think that, obviously as a therapist, this is something that I see a lot, but humans, we want to be listened to. We want to feel heard and we want to feel understood. So, and I think sometimes we get nervous about asking the question like, are you okay? Or how do you feel about COVID? Are you feeling depressed? Are you feeling down? We feel nervous about asking it because we're worried that the person is then going to feel worse. When in reality, people actually want to talk about how they feel a lot of the time. Obviously, I am generalizing. But when we're able to ask someone how they feel and then listen to them and give them that gift of being heard, I think that's a really beautiful thing. So I think when we're listening to any person, whether they're senior or otherwise, it's a really nice thing to be very present with with them, show them that you're listening to them, ask them questions. You can tell them that you understand what they're going through is difficult. You can validate them. And I think those are small things, but they're very, very big things as well.
Yeah, sometimes you have lots to offer because you have time and you can hear someone, you can listen to them. That is invaluable, right? Sometimes we underestimate the power of, I'm here for you. How is your day? This is CMHA Mental Health Week, and their promotion is the following. How are you doing? And the person says, I'm fine. And they're trying to educate people that behind this, I'm fine, there's a story. And try to be this person that's going to listen to the story. Sometimes the story is fine. They're doing well. They're trying to be active. They're doing yoga from home, and they're spending time with their children. And sometimes it's just a difficult answer. I'm very concerned about this COVID-19. I don't know about my job. I'm concerned. I don't know what kind of resources I have. And many people are just scared. Like Jessica said, I don't know. I don't know if they're going to feel worse. And I know that many people just don't want to ask because they don't know they can help. But listening is helping, right? Sometimes you don't offer a solution. You just say, I'm here for you. How can I hear you? I may not know the solution for your problem, but I may be able just to listen to you. And as you talk, we may find a solution together, or just the fact that you're processing is going to help you. So I'm here. And now we do have this kind of time, a little bit more, right? If you want to. So it's an extra effort. We can go. But let's talk a little bit about population that I find it's so important, and sometimes we're not paying attention to them. Children. Children are experiencing COVID-19 as well, right? Not only adults, not only older adults. And sometimes they are listening to the news we're watching. Sometimes they're listening to us and their concerns in a phone call. How can we help children through COVID-19? And my first question is, how can we educate them about this pandemic without creating more concern than necessary, right? Am I making any sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a really important thing and I think you've touched on this, is the kids are watching us. They're watching how we're reacting to this, and they're often going to model our behavior. So if we're showing a lot of anxiety, they're going to feel anxious too. So it's important to check your own anxiety, see where it's at. And if it's high, then you want to think about some of the ways that you can address it, like we were talking about earlier. For listening to the news, limiting the amount of news is probably a good idea. But make sure your kids have time to ask questions about COVID, to share their concerns. It's important for them to be able to share that anxiety if they have any. There's a lot of good resources out there right now for kids, storybook kind of formats for understanding anxiety related to COVID if they're having difficulty with that. But some of the practical things that we can do to reduce anxiety for children as well is what we talked about earlier, is having a routine for them and having the opportunity for them to engage in healthy things like regular exercise. Take care of yourself as parents too. If you're not taking care of yourself and you're feeling stress, they're going to feel that stress as well. So self-care allows you to react in a more productive and positive way with your children. And if they need help, or if you need help, if it's the anxiety is getting so bad for you or your children, you need to reach out for more help if it's interfering with your functioning.
Yes, are psychologists and mental health working online right now? Do you find that people are offering support online? I think I'm asking this for Jessica. Do you know of anybody, like if there's a person who needs a psychologist right now or a counselor, are there resources available in that end?
Yes, absolutely. So there are a lot of different hotlines that you can call in Canada. Firstly, if you just want to talk on the phone, there are a number of them listed on the Canadian Canada Service website, or I can't remember what it is, but there are a lot online that you can Google. And also, online therapy or Zoom therapy is a great way to go. It's often, it can be cheaper than going to therapy, and it can be quite powerful. So I'm not sure if specifically with children, I'm just talking generally, but you can access online therapy. There's a lot of it, even texting. There's lots of different ways you can find help online. So.
Yeah, because there are resources, and I know Shannon, she gave me a document before, and she lists some of the resources we're going to be sharing with you. These resources who we're watching, I think we can post on Facebook, or we can post, I think, yeah, we mentioned about posting it. But caring for children, I love how Shannon said that you need to check yourself too, because it is likely that sometimes children react because we are reacting, right? Can you tell Jessica a little bit about the relationship in a home, like children, and how they can be reacting to things that they're observing and all of that, and how we can control those things? When talking about caring for children, what are the things that we can control at this moment? What we can do to support them?
I think that there's a lot of pressure on parents right now to be homeschooling their kids, and obviously that's important. I'm sure there are rules about what you're supposed to be teaching them and that sort of thing. But I think that it's really important to not underestimate how valuable play is for children. So play is a way that children process different things, and they process stresses through play. And so when your child is playing, that's really important, valuable time spent. I know that there are schools, I think in Sweden or one of those Scandinavian countries, where they put a really large emphasis on play, even maybe more so than learning, because it is really, really powerful for children. And I think along with that, it's good to observe your children's play, and not just in terms of supervising them, but notice what they're playing, notice what they're doing when they play. Are they talking about, anxieties in different ways in their play? Like, what can you notice, that might be slightly different, and how can you play with them to kind of have an interaction that might help them process what is going on?
That's awesome, because then from that you can gather information, right? They're playing, they're not paying attention to you, paying attention to them, and some topics might come up, and you know how to help them and address them. Yes,
and I don't want to put more pressure on parents, because I feel like there's so much pressure already to be like teaching and playing and everything else and cooking dinner. But just kind of have a little eye on that. Play is important, and often children are expressing emotions through play. So just to be aware of that one little thing. And also, I have to turn a light on. I feel like my screen's really dark.
Take your time. No, take your time. And Jessica mentioned, right, the play time with your children. Sometimes I find that quality can be so important if you're spending time with your children. Sometimes you're overwhelmed, and it may seem like you don't have time to spend with them. But if you spend not too much time, but it's quality time where you put your phone aside, right? Where you're paying attention, undivided attention to them. You're having a game night, I don't know, something that won't take too much of your time, but you're going to be there present. Let's talk about mindfulness. Being mindful when you're with your children of them. That may impact them immensely, and that might open up conversations. And just talking personally about myself with my children, I find that there are precious moments when they're willing to open up more. When they wake up, during breakfast time, and sometimes when they go to bed. So a bedtime routine, when you read a story to them and spend a little time to them, may be a precious moment when they will share with you their concerns, their fears, and maybe that's a nugget of a moment where you can talk to them and say, you know what, this is what's going on. This is the numbers, or not even share full numbers, but this is what they're doing to mitigate this problem, and try to bring them the facts and what people are doing, because there are a lot of people. Frontline workers are there working, but there are a lot of people also doing research, trying to help with this problem, right? So there are a lot of people trying to resolve this issue, and it's nice for them to know the good, not only the bad, in my humble opinion. Okay. There's one that I find that it's really important question, because I think this is a special population, like older adults, we have in our group, and we have potentially more people watching that are related to frontline workers. So they are at home caring for their family when their loved ones are out fighting the fight, trying to care for people who are sick. And I feel like they are in a special position because they have more access to this coronavirus, more than many of us who are just staying home, protecting our loved ones. How can we help this? What kind of hope they can have? Not even what kind of hope, but what there is related to mental health. It could be hope, but it could be something else. For these people who are concerned for their loved ones because they are frontline workers. I'm going to start with you, Jessica. How can we support these people with mental health content?
So, I think that it's really important to try and connect in with your relationships. So how do you connect with either your significant other or your loved ones who are frontline workers? What are the ways that you are able to spend time working on your relationship? Is it talking during dinner, or is it phone calls when they're at work, or I don't know what it might be, but really pay attention to the ways that you do connect with them. And I also think, and it might sound kind of silly or simple, but I think the love languages, the idea of the love languages is a nice, simple tool that can be valuable to lots of people. So basically the 5 love languages are 5 different ways that people express their love to those around them, or that they feel particularly loved by those around them. So there's kind of a 2-way situation going on. So the 5 love languages are physical touch, words of affirmation, quality time, gifts, and acts of service. So you can Google that if that was too brief an explanation. But basically, if you're able to identify the way that your partner feels particularly loved or connected to you in these 5 love languages, and you're able to sort of show them that you're connected to them through that, I think that can be a good tool to use. So I'm sorry if that was a very brief explanation. I can go more in depth if you need.
It's a really good explanation, because if I hear that you're saying try to connect emotionally with your loved one because they're in the front line, right? And how can you support them? And I really love this 5 love languages. I've read the book a few times, and I think it's a great way to relate to the people you love. How do you feel loved? It's more like the way you feel loved, that's how I'm going to show love to you. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. And that, because it might be different to the way that you experience love. So, for example, you might be someone who really wants to spend quality time with your partner, and that might be really important to you and how you feel really connected to them. But your partner might be more concerned with gifts, right? They might feel really, really loved when you give them a particular gift, like some gloves in winter or whatever. It's just a silly example. But so you might actually be sort of missing each other if you're both communicating your love to each other in different ways. And it's not that you don't love each other equally. It's just that you're communicating slightly differently. So it can be a really good conversation to have. Just, that talk about, well, how do you feel the most cherished and the most connected to and the most loved? And how can I bring more of that into my own style of connecting with you?
Thank you. I think that's a great advice to offer to those who are trying to care for the loved ones who are in the front line. I don't want to put you on the spot, Shannon, but I know you have loved ones who are currently in the front line. Is there any word of advice that you can give for those who are in a similar situation that you are?
I think one thing is to just really be there for them in terms of having a listening ear. And like Jessica said, we have to figure out what is their love language. So we're giving them what they need and what's most important to them. But they're going through something right now that the rest of us don't understand. And so it's going to take a lot of listening for us to understand where they're coming from. One thing that I've noticed with healthcare professionals in my family is a focus on positivity, and looking for the positives in the situation, looking for what good will come out of the situation. So showing gratitude for where we're at right now. But if someone's not having such a great reaction to it and they're really stressed and their emotions are all over the place, reassure them that that's a normal reaction, that what they're going through is a disaster response. This is big stuff. It can be traumatic depending on where they're placed as essential workers or medical workers. Assure them that it's normal and be there for them in the ways that you can. Offer them practical help. Don't expect as much of them from home, perhaps. Help. Maybe they need a break from hearing about COVID. Maybe it's COVID all day. So what they really need at home is to not hear about COVID for a while, and try and create relaxing situations for them that give them a break, whether it be, some easy Zoom conversations with, low key with a couple friends or family, some time alone to do something that they enjoy, or just self-care activities.
Yes, it's really nice when you're able to assess where your loved one is at, right? If they need some space, you offer them space. If they want to break from the conversation of COVID, offer them that. And it goes along, I think both of your ideas, they tie well together. It's trying to get a sense of how your partner is doing, your loved one is doing, what is their love language right now, what do they need right now, and trying to get it from them, and maybe you can support them the best way. There's another thing that I think it's important for us to address, because even though it's mental health, and even though the government is offering support for those who are not financially doing well, is there anything we can do for those who are financially struggling right now? Is there anything that mental health ideas can do for those people who are struggling financially? Am I making any sense with my question? I know as a community, we need to come together. We need to try to assess our community. But is there any specific ideas you can suggest to help those who are in need? This is a kind of a curveball maybe, and I apologize.
I've been part of a group of psychologists in BC that have been getting trained in what's called psychological first aid, and that's responding to disasters. And one of the interesting things that I learned during the training was because we're going to be responding to calls all over the province for people who are stressed by their current situation, we're like, how do we connect people with local resources, local practical resources, such as things related to finances, such as food? And the psychologist that was instructing the course said, one of the ways I find that's best is to connect people with their local churches. Local churches usually will help people out. So I thought that was interesting and quite practical, and anybody can look up a church's number from their local area. So that's a really practical financial help, perhaps.
Yeah, and we are a local church, so let us know if you need any kind of support. How about you, Jessica? Anything you can think about that we can do for the less fortunate at this moment?
I don't have a lot of input, but I do think that there can be a lot of shame around financial stress.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, a few ways that we can help kind of mitigate some of that shame is to ask people how they're doing. It's a delicate thing because there's so much taboo around, not being nosy and, not overstepping. But I think, just going back to like asking how people really are and what they're really stressed about. Having those conversations can kind of open things up for people. And I think trying to kind of bring some of that shame down a little bit, and that this is a really hard time for a lot of people. That's really normal to be having some sort of financial stress in this time. So I think we really need to be mindful about how much shame we're putting on that, when really this is a pandemic. It's not anything less than that. So
I love that you talked about shame, because it's such a huge barrier. Shame is a huge barrier to get help. Emotional help is a huge barrier to get financial help. And how do we mitigate shame? By having conversations, right? By asking people, how are you doing? Can I help you? And sometimes I'm not going to be the one who has the financial support, but I can connect a few friends and make some come out of that. Talk to a local church, like Shannon said. I can be the person that will connect. I love what you said too, Shannon, about advocating. You end up becoming an advocate for those people that are talking on the phone, and how you can connect them to resources and supports. And being an advocate can be a huge impact for those who are in need. I feel like I try to be not huge, but for me it's very important to advocate mental health. How can you be mentally happier, right? And I think mental health ties with everything: physical, emotional, social. And that's what we're trying to do here. Try to offer support to you who is struggling. We are struggling right now. But I hope that by having this conversation tonight with Shannon and Jessica, with amazing ideas they're offering and suggestions and ways that you can cope and help others, you're going to come out of this conversation thinking there is hope. I can survive this pandemic. I may have to low down a little bit of my, being a perfectionist. I may have to spend more quality time with my family. And this is the last question I'm going to have for you. And then we're going to close with maybe some final thoughts that you may have. A lot of people are finding that staying together at home is bringing more conflict. It's bringing more problems. it's making people more angrier, or it's being a great thing because we're spending time together. So I love how Jessica talked about spectrum. There's a whole spectrum of experiences right now. But let's think about those who are struggling, those who are angry more, those who are losing their patience with their children more, those who are feeling overwhelmed, and that is impacting the well-being. I think you touched on things already that are going to help to mitigate that problem. But is there anything else you can offer to think of those families who are under a pressure cooker right now because they're at homes isolated? I know we have spring now and we're able to go for walks if we're keeping our safe distance from one another, and that may help. That may be one thing that people can do. But can you think of things that families who are in a bubble together can do to help to live maybe a little bit better during this time that is long but is gonna come to an end, right?
Yeah, I definitely think that we have to acknowledge that it would be very normal right now to be experiencing more bickering, more conflict in relationships, whether that's with your partner or with your children or whoever you live with, okay, because you're with them a lot. So I think, we need to not have too much shame about that. That's very normal right now. With that, one thing that can often people get sucked into a trap of in conflict, getting really, really stuck in the details of things. So, your argument might be about just a silly example, like socks on the floor or something like that. Okay. And it's really common that couples get sucked into, well, but I did the dishwasher, but well, your socks are on the floor. And they get really sucked into all these little details, but they're not actually talking about what the real underlying problem is. So I think that when you're getting into conflict in your relationship, it can be really good to notice when you're kind of going down that detail spiral, and just take a moment to say, okay, what is it that I'm really needing from my partner? What are my basic emotional needs in this? Do I need to feel understood? Do I need to feel that what I've expressed is important? What is it that I'm really needing from them in an emotional sense? And once you can convey that to your partner and even have a conversation about this idea first, so it's something that you're going to be talking about together, that can be really powerful, because we can all spend hours and hours going around the details of some silly little argument. But the only productive way to move forwards through an argument is to look at what it is you actually need from your partner, what they need from you, and how you can understand each other better. And I think being on lockdown right now is really shining a light on a lot of issues in people's relationships. And it's important to remember that those issues were probably already there. It's just that this situation has kind of exacerbated them. So they've become bigger and brighter and clearer. And while that's a lot to handle when you're dealing with it on the day-to-day basis, there's also an opportunity there to say, okay, well, this issue was already in our relationship. Now we can look at it really clearly, and maybe we can start addressing it together. What do I need from you? What do you need from me? How can we move forwards?
Yeah, that's awesome. Get to the bottom of the issue, right, with compassion, and try to see what's really the needs that are coming out of this arguments. Because anger is one feeling, but what is under that anger, right? What do you really need? I think that's a great suggestion, yes. I go back to you, Shannon.
I don't know if I had too much to add to that. One relationship I was thinking about that may be challenging right now is between parents and teenagers. We haven't really talked so much about teenagers specifically yet, but they could be going through a particularly difficult time right now because, socializing at that age is often very important, but there's also a lot of milestones being reached during high school years that now these kids are missing out on. So giving your kids a chance to grieve over those losses, maybe they were going to have their first summer job this year, or their graduation was this year. And now what's happening with that? So give them a chance to talk about those kind of losses that they're experiencing as well would be helpful, probably.
Yes. Being a teenager at this time might not be the easiest thing. And if you have a parent who is empathetic, might go a long way. And I think if you have a teenager at home, maybe you can identify yourself with what Shannon is sharing. We're coming to an end. We're coming to our closing time. I just want to check our Facebook here. I know we had Melanie in here commenting. Judy, hi Judy. Hi Shauna, hi Heather, hi Karen, hi Dawn. It's really nice, Wanda. Really nice to see your names here. Gabriel, hello from Brazil. And we saw some people saying their city, Saskatoon. Really nice. I hope you enjoy your time together. I hope you were able to learn some important skills here, or maybe able just to have a place where you can think about these things. Maybe it was something that you hadn't thought about, your mental health during this time. And as we're coming to our end, I want to give you an opportunity, Shannon and Jessica, if there's anything you had in mind that you prepared to talk tonight that you didn't, or any closing comment, or not that you have to, we can close here right now, but I just don't want to, you have such valuable input. I just don't want to go without you having the opportunity to maybe share something that you wanted to, but don't feel like you have to.
Well, I think one important thing to keep in mind is that people are generally resilient. Yes, this is a difficult time, and yes, this is probably going to bring up new emotions that you maybe didn't even know you had in you, but overall, people are usually resilient. And think back to the past when you've experienced other difficult situations, and how did you solve those problems, and try and apply that to now. But if things are feeling consistently overwhelming, you're consistently not getting enough sleep, you're consistently not able to keep up with basic daily activities, then it's important to look for help for you or your loved one that's experiencing those kind of symptoms. A resource that is updated daily and it is by province is the number 211, and they can you could tell them what your problem is, and they can give you a list of what resources are available for whatever specific issue you're having with. So that especially during this time, I think there's a lot of updates happening daily as different services go online. So it's a good resource if you're concerned that this problem is becoming too big for you to handle.
Thank you.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And the only other thing I would like to say is, we've talked a lot about acknowledging that these are difficult times. And I think that's so important. I also think it's important to think about what are the good things that we're experiencing as a result of these times. And I know that might be really difficult for some people, so I don't want to minimize that at all. But it can be really easy to focus on all the things that are being taken away from us right now, all the things we're missing out on, or all the grievances we have. And it's so important to grieve those things properly. Mm-hmm. But it can also really help us to shift into a little bit of, what is this time giving me that I might not have had otherwise? Do I have more time at home with my family? Do I have more time to work on something that I want to work on in terms of a little project? Do I have more time to be in my garden? Is there something small that you can do more of in this time that is something positive and joyful in your day amidst all the other difficult things?
That's awesome. Thank you so much. If I were in a public place, we would give you both a round of applause now for so much help you've given us tonight. Thank you so much. I'm very excited that we had this tonight. I'm very thankful that you both agreed to join us. And there's so much richness in your background and your expertise. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I cannot thank you enough for joining us tonight. And I just want to finish saying that I want to thank you too. You watched us. You joined us on Facebook. You joined us on YouTube. And I'm thankful that you were with us. Thank you for the messages that you shared with us on Facebook, letting us know where you're from. We hope to be doing more and more online things. But I want to say something. We are a community of faith. Faith can be quite helpful at this time too. If you feel like it's something that you would like to learn more, if it's something that you'd like to connect with God, learn more about God, we have great programs happening. New Perspective Community, you can find us on YouTube. I don't know if you watch us on YouTube, but we also have a Facebook page. We have an Instagram, New Perspective Community. And we meet every Saturday morning on Zoom. We're doing everything online now. So now is the time to join, even if you're not in Saskatoon. We have studies about wisdom and Proverbs on Monday nights. And we will also have a study, Discovery 316 in the Bible on Tuesdays nights. So we have stuff going on. So if you're interested, If you find that faith is something that might help you through this difficult time, get in touch with us. We're here for you. And I hope this is one of our Zoom meetings, one of the many that we're going to have about mental health, maybe during COVID, maybe after COVID, because caring for our mental health is always a good idea. Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Jessica. I wish you both all the best to you and your families. And I hope that one day we're going to have a conversation post-COVID-19 and see how resilient we were, and that we were able to survive, additional to your special skills and support through this time. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful night, and keep in touch with us through our social medias: Facebook, New Perspective Community, YouTube, New Perspective Community, or Instagram. We're always posting things. Join us for a meeting if you want to. Have a great night. Thank you so much.